Hello humans, it's just Martine, and it's time for another Dollar Tree reading vlog. I have this handy dandy stack of 5 books that I've gotten from the Dollar Tree at various points over the various years, and I'm going to read them and review them for you so we can talk about like the quality and diversity of reads that are often available at Dollar Trees, because I think that's interesting. You guys seem to enjoy my last video like this, so let's get into it. The 5 books I'm going to read are Wise Young Fool by Sean Bowden, Don't Turn Around by Michelle Gagnon, In the Land of the Living by Austin Ratner, Dividing Eden by Joelle Charbonneau, and The Year of the Runaways by Sanjeev Sahota. Some of these are pretty big, lots of them are quite tall, but we've at least got one YA in there, and I'll tell you what they're about as I read them. Let's get to it. All right, so I just finished my first read for this, Don't Turn Around, which I think is maybe the one that I've had the longest on my shelves, and I picked this up because it's a hacking story. It's following 2 perspectives. One is this really rich kid, and he's the creator of this hacktivist website, and then one is this teenage girl who's been in the foster care system for a really long time, and she's on her own now, and basically starts with her waking up in a facility, realizing that something has happened to her and her escaping, and then goes from there. It's really interesting and set up for the potential of a sequel. I don't know if there is one, and I don't know if I'd read it, although I am giving this one 4 stars. I originally picked this up, first of all, because it looks cool and interesting and all that stuff, but also because I love reading books with like hackers and big computer people in them, in spite of the fact, or maybe because of the fact, that I'm terrible with technology. Maybe my suspension of disbelief is especially great because I'm truly clueless on the subject, but I love it. And the added element of having a discussion about social workers and foster care system in general and child protective services, just my favorite thing to talk about. It's why I got my child advocacy certificate. I loved this. This was very well done. And I read it basically in 2 sittings, where the last 2/3 of it, I read tonight in the last 2 hours or so. Flew through this, enjoyed it immensely. Dollar Tree book for the win. I just finished my next book for this video, Wise Young Fool, and I'm giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Once Goodreads works again. But for now, let me tell you about it. So this is written kind of in a diary format. The concept is that it's the journal of a teenager who ends up in juvie for 90 days. You don't find out until the end what he's in there for. It's dual timeline. There are some chapters written about before he got in, and his time with his band, which eventually ends up being called Wise Young Fool, the trouble that he gets into high school and stuff. Some interesting things of note: his mom is a lesbian. She's great. Her partner is greater though. Looper is a pretty great character. His sister has also passed away because of a drunk driving accident, so that adds an interesting dimension to the story. He's got a very specific voice that I don't think will be for everyone. This character does. I liked him more than I disliked him. I mean, he was a very angry kid, but it's interesting to see especially his interactions chronicled with the psychologist at juvie who's assigned him to write this journal and stuff. And then the second timeline is him in juvie, especially talking to Dr. Benway, who's the psychologist. I enjoyed it for the most part. The beginning was a little hard to get into just because I was getting adjusted to the writing style, and then I flew through like the middle 200 pages in one sitting, and then I read the last 100 pages today. Overall, an enjoyable read. Now is probably a good time as any to update you on where I am. So the next book that I'm reading for this challenge is Dividing Eden, and I had totally forgotten that this was about twins too. So I just have to say that several of the Dollar Tree books I pick up happen to be about twins. But anyway, currently I'm on page 227 out of 318, and I'm enjoying it so far. It definitely had a slower start, but I wasn't expecting it to be quick because I'd seen somewhere online that it was a slower paced book, which is fine with me, especially if you know that going into a book. I feel like if you're expecting it to be fast paced and it's not, then that's disappointing. I do have to say that I'm kind of worried about the last like third of this book because it is the beginning of a series, and I'm worried that almost nothing is going to be wrapped up by the end of this book. I'm hoping that it will be, of course, because I'm not going to go seek out the sequel or anything since I paid $1 for this book, and so far I'm thinking it's good, it's average, but not to the point where I would be like, oh man, I need to track down the sequel or something. Like, I'd casually see if my library had it, but if not, then I wouldn't bother. I feel like it took the first third of the book for the plot to actually began. Like, there was a solid, I don't know, 40, maybe more pages that was just set up, and then something big happened, and I was like, oh, so the plot's about this. I had not read the inside flap again to jog my memory before I jumped in, and I was like, oh, so this is the plot. And then like 70 pages after that, the real plot clicked into place and started unraveling. And I was like, oh, okay. So the more overarching view of this is like twins who are competing for a crown, but they start out not really being anywhere near the line of succession. They are a prince and princess, but their father, the king, is healthy. Their mother, the queen, would be able to take over. And then there is a crown prince. They have an older brother, Prince Micah. But then some gnarly events lead to the point where these two have to compete for the crown. So there is a trial aspect, as in like challenges, not as in like court trials, in the second like half-ish of this book. And I am finding those intriguing so far, especially because the characters are growing more and more morally gray as they continue down the path. And that was one of the things I was hoping based off of like the cover of the book. I do have to say that in a way, it kind of reminded me of A Court of Thorns and Roses, how like this whole world was set up and then things happened and then trials began. You know what I mean? I do think there are lots of interesting dynamics at play, not many of which I know whether or not they're good compared to when they're written in other books, because this is fantasy and so it's a genre I don't read that often. But there are aspects like seeing into the future, potential curses, all of those things. It's an interesting look at the different strengths of different royals. So each of the twins has their own strength. The female is very like physically protective of her brother because he has some health conditions, and then the brother is very like kind and smart and considerate to everybody in the kingdom. So he's managed to bring in a stray child to help in the castle to be more of like a page boy. He basically rescued him, and then they also get all their power to keep the lights on and keep their enemies at bay through like wind power. So they have all these windmills, and he's taken it upon himself to learn how the windmills operate and how to make them better and how to make the lights better, as opposed to the crown prince, who is all about like fighting and going to war with the guards and such. And so his father has always kind of looked down on the fact that he went this route instead of the guard training route, but because of his health conditions, it's just better for him. So they're both pretty interesting characters, and I like reading from their different perspectives, and I love seeing the ways that they're miscommunicating with one another. Not in the way that, like, you know how in romance books people miscommunicate and it's the most aggravating way? It's like these people are clearly being manipulated by others around them into misinterpreting and misunderstanding their twin, who they should know better than anybody else. So it's just really intriguing so far, and now I've talked about it for 5 minutes and I'm not even done with it. So great news, I did end up finishing Dividing Eden, which was my third out of the 5 reads for this, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I don't know why I'm getting like real middle of the road ratings with this round of the Dollar Tree book reading, because like I've been reading Dollar Tree books for other videos and they've been getting great reviews. So this just makes the Dollar Tree selection look like not great, but to be honest, like I've read some fabulous books from there. Anyway, the point is, the ending of this was very interesting, and most of my initial like review of the book stands. I just wanted to let you know that I'd finished it. I'm not exactly sure how people who read fantasy all the time are going to like this. It didn't have many like magical aspects. It was definitely light on the magic, but I kind of preferred that it was pretty easy to understand the system of the kingdom and all that stuff, although it did have a few fun things going on in there. It was, again, slower in the beginning, but I feel like once we got to the trials, things definitely sped up, and I did get some answers that I wanted. Definitely set it up to have the second book, but not in the way that like my life is going to end if I don't read the second book. So good stuff. The other day I started my 4th book for this challenge, The Year of the Runaways. Proof is in the pudding. The other day I brought this to like a rehearsal that I just kind of had to like sit there during, and I was kind of reading it, and during one of the breaks, one of my friends who really loves books was like, I was looking at your book, is it any good? It seems interesting. I was like, yeah, I actually got it at the Dollar Tree. And she was like, you're joking. I was like, I am not joking. This is Dollar Tree stuff. Oh yeah. I finally finished it, and here are my thoughts. The basic conception of this book is it follows this small group of people. They're all Indian in like cultural and ethnic descent, but only a few of them start this story in India. It's this whole story about how different young people are trying to get into different countries away from India to try and make money to send back to their families. So one of them comes with like a school visa, but he doesn't actually go to school. Like he goes to the school to get his visa approved and stuff, but then he just like works the whole time instead of going to school. There's one who is there on like a marriage visa with this other Indian woman who lives in the UK already. There are some that are there illegally. All of them are there in like slightly shady ways. As I said, the one who's there for school isn't actually there for school. It's just his way into the country. The one with the marriage visa, he is like legally married to this woman, but they don't have like any relation. They're not like, they don't act like a married couple or anything, and they don't even live together. They have to fool the like Office of Immigration the whole year so that he can get his like permanent stamp to live there, and they can file for divorce like right after. And so it's basically about these characters and their struggles with like employment, and the stories of how they each like made the decision to come to the UK, how they got there, because they do end up at some points all living together. The three main guys, and then there's one main girl. I think it has an interesting discussion about like immigration, emigration, and also the price of work and migrant work, the extents that people will go to try and make a better life for themselves. I liked that it was a book like that wasn't set in the United States, because I think so often when we think about people immigrating places, we think about the United States, but there are so many countries around the whole world where people also immigrate as frequently as people immigrate to the US. So it's interesting seeing that. And then this was so rich with Indian culture, and I really appreciated those aspects. Yeah, so overall it was like very well done. This was also shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. Other people think it was good too, but I gave it a solid 3.5. It was a slower read, and it's a really long one in some ways, but I didn't ever despise the fact that I was reading it, which is good. I'm in the middle of In the Land of the Living, and it's a very strange book so far, but I'm really enjoying it. I was at less than 30% earlier today, and then I reached a stride with it and I couldn't put it down from like 40 to 50% maybe. I think maybe I'm liking the second main character more. So like most of the first third of the story, it's about this guy named Isidore, but then even though it's third person, the narration is basically taken over by his son Leo, and I'm curious to see if that sticks through the third part of the book or if somebody else takes it over. But I'm really enjoying Leo's perspective. He's very angsty, but like I'm liking it. I also think it's just making more sense to me than Isidore's part. I don't know why. I had to tell you because I was just sitting here and I was like, I'm just enjoying the process of reading this. I just finished my last book for this. It went back and forth the whole time with how I was feeling about it and how well I could pay attention to it, but in the end I'm going to be giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. This fits into a specific type of book that I often end up reading from the Dollar Tree, not because they overwhelmingly have this type of book at the Dollar Tree, but overwhelmingly because I, for some reason, pick it up. I think it's literary fiction, but it's also in the brain of one specific person, but then it switches people partway through because it's like a generational story. How the person thinks about the world is very like weird. I don't know. It's one of those books that definitely is kind of like the character stream of consciousness, and sometimes you're not on the same wavelength as the character. In the front flap of this book, this is said mainly to be about this road trip between two brothers, but actually that road trip is only in part 3. So part 1 of the book is about those brothers' father, and then the second part of the book is mainly just about Leo, the eldest son, and then the last third is about Leo and Max trip together just to go to somebody's wedding. I don't think I ever gathered whose wedding. It was probably said, but I just didn't get it. But overall, I thought this was like an enjoyable experience. There were some chapters that I followed better than others, but overall, there are always such interesting like lines and thoughts in books like these. And so I'm going to continue reading them, even if sometimes they make no sense to me. What an end to a review. Even if they make no sense to me, I'm gonna keep reading them. That's it. I read 5 books from the Dollar Tree. All but one of them I think got 3.5 stars. And the one that didn't get 3.5 stars got 4 stars. More good than bad. But again, I mentioned that there are lots of books that get way higher scores than that from the Dollar Tree for me, but not usually ones that get lower scores than that. Like I guess I've had a 2-star from there, but it's less common. I usually have like solid reads from the Dollar Tree. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below which books from one of my recent Dollar Tree hauls should I read next for the next like version of this. let me know down below. And subscribe for more reading, writing, and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!